A moment ago, you heard Ed Sadlowski talk about how hard it is to get some roses along with the bread when you're working in a factory. The problem is that most factory work is routine work, turning the man who runs a machine into a machine himself. It's the legacy, the curse of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, the boredom of factory work could be wiped out if we all return to simple cottage life and cease to demand the benefits of an industrial society. That won't happen, of course. So the trick is to minimize the boredom as much as possible. Well, here's a place that seems to be succeeding. It's the Sullair Corporation of Michigan City, Indiana. And they make industrial rotary screw air compressors in all shapes, sizes, and colors. It's something you're never ever going to go into a department store and buy, but an awful lot of the things that we take for granted in life depend on air compressors. So take my word for it, they're very useful gadgets. At first glance, Sullair seems no different from 1,000 other middle-sized factories. It's what you don't see that makes the difference. You don't see a time clock, and you don't see any sub-foreman. You don't see any foreman at all. Hang around for a while, and you will see men working a 10-hour day, but only 4 days a week. And some other men working a 12-hour day, 6 days a week, but then taking a 7-day weekend off. One other thing you don't see around here is a union, and one other thing you do see, available to the men on the factory floor, are those expensive diversions that corporate executives usually reserve for themselves. For example, Sullair has 2 indoor tennis courts open day and night. They're connected to the factory building, a short walk past the basketball court, the squash court, and the sauna. Just outside the assembly shop, there are 2 more tennis courts, plus a pro shop that sells equipment at cost. The tennis itself is free, and so are lessons for everyone in the family. The place is designed to look more like a country club than a plant site. Next to the tennis courts, there's a swimming pool for employees and their families. And behind the swimming pool, a handsomely landscaped picnic ground. It took Sullair workers a little time before they would accept the idea that the country club side of the job was not the preserve of executives, but they have managed to adjust. Most company cafeterias aren't noted for their food or their ambiance, and for most factory workers, the lunch pail still prevails. Not so at Sullair, which boasts a gourmet cafe. What you got?
Today I've got roast beef, which was marinated for a few days, then it's served with a special wine sauce, and we have buttered Brussels sprouts and baked potato with sour cream.
Sounds good.
Care for some?
Yes, please.
Okay. And a few pieces of French bread.
Lovely.
How about a cup of homemade vegetable beef soup also?
No, thank you.
And how about some rice pudding for dessert?
Perfect. And what about some salad?
The salad? Sure. Would you like the Italian, Thousand Island, or French?
French dressing, please.
French dressing? Okay. There we are.
Thank you. How much is that?
80 cents altogether.
80 cents?
80 cents.
You're joking.
No, sir.
Is that just for me because we got cameras here?
No, no. And that includes coffee or cold drinks, too.
Okay. And no tipping.
Enjoy your lunch, please.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. In spite of all the camouflage, Sullair really is a factory. The 250 shop workers spend most of their time working, and it's Sullair's approach to work that really makes it different from most factories. Michigan City is in the heart of America's industrial belt, and old-timers like Bob Robb remember how it was in other places. You worked down the road for another plant down here for 23 years. You worked here for 8 years. What's the difference between the two?
Difference between night and day. You're a person here. Over there, you're just a part of a machine, part of a clock number.
But is it just a matter of size, the fact that they've got a couple of thousand employees down there and only a couple of hundred over here?
No, it could work anywhere. The principle and the policies they got here could work any place. The size of the organization, I don't think it's got anything to do with it.
A favorite word sociologists use to describe most factory work is dehumanizing. Sullair's workers don't use the word, but they know the problem.
Well, I worked out at the steel mills for 10 years, and it was very rigid. If you wanted time off or something, you had to give them 2 or 3 days' notice. Then you had to get 2 or 3 supervisors to okay it. And then you had to get somebody to trade with you. And it was just a big hassle all the way around.
For 16 years, I worked under a piecework system where you worked under the old stopwatch. And every second that you worked, why, you was getting timed on it. You're, I'd say a machine is all. Here, it's more relaxed. It's all different.
Everything around here, we do it on our own, you know. No one really comes down and say, well, you shouldn't or you should. The place where I worked at before, there's all the time on you. You know, they'd say things to you like, well, the honeymoon's over, you know. Well, when I come here, the honeymoon just began.
The author of all this is Don Hoods, president and founder of Sullair. In 11 years, starting from scratch, he's built a $50 million a year business and made himself into a multimillionaire. He was set on that path after he was fired for insubordination from a job in a nearby factory. He went into direct competition with his former employers. Okay, so there you were. You started up your own business for fun, profit, and revenge. And
revenge is a sincere motive, you know.
And you make a great thing of the fact that you don't have foremen, that you don't have a time clock to punch, that you don't have a lot of the traditional things that one expects inside a factory. And a lot of people are going to look at this and say, can't be done. You can't run an efficient, profitable organization without those checks.
The man who says that is the man who doesn't punch the time clock. It's the plant manager. Ask the plant manager to go in and punch the time clock. Ask the industrial engineer to punch the time clock. He doesn't have to. Why does he think that the man on the factory floor is any different than he is? How are you going to tell that guy who has some intelligence that he's not human, that he has to punch in, punch out, march, listen to one buzzer, listen to another buzzer, and if he doesn't hear the buzzer, then he doesn't do it. If he does hear it, he does it. They drive you nuts. You couldn't do it, and I couldn't do it.
Instead of buzzers, what you hear at Sullair is music, each to his own taste.
Rumbles my lonely bed. How much does it cost? I'll buy it. The time is all we lost. I'll try it.
Let me just be a devil's advocate. A lot of people are going to look at this and say, look, the softer you make life for people on a shop floor, the less they're going to give you in return. What do you say to them?
If they say that, then they're welcome to that viewpoints. But it's our absolute belief, and it's not only mine, that we get higher productivity and we have facts to prove it.
Sullair doesn't seem to have the problems of absenteeism, drugs, and even sabotage that plague some other factories. What's more, according to Hoods, Sullair actually outproduces its competition by better than 2 to 1. One reason is that by eliminating most supervisory jobs, labor costs have been lowered. Another factor is that trust seems to encourage initiative.
Well, we go down and help each other. If a guy needs a hand, you always tell him to holler, and you go there and help him. And that whole idea of nobody standing over here, why, it seems to work very well.
In most factories, there seems to be an effort to break down work into simple tasks that can be repeated over and over. This makes for cheap, easily replaceable labor and better control. It also makes for monotony.
The worst job is the one nut on the one bolt day after day after day after day. And I don't think any of our employees really get stuck with an overwhelming amount of that.
At Sullair, there's a conscious policy encouraging workers to develop a variety of skills.
If he's versatile and can do many jobs, that's the highest paid employee in most cases. If a guy can go from 1 week to do this job on one machine to another job on another machine the next week and still be as productive in both jobs, it isn't quite as boring.
And I think this is what they're going to all companies are going to have to go to, because the more they invent a machine that you stand there and push the button and let it do the work, these jobs are going to, mentally, they're just going to tear people up, and nobody's going to want the job. You go to the steel mills, and the guys make twice as much as I do, and they're quitting left and right, because you just can't take this kind of boring work.
It would be too much to expect of any employee, including those of Sullair, to be absolutely content. They do have some gripes, and the chief one is, of course, money. Sullair does not pay the highest wages in these parts. They're somewhere around average. For example, a relatively new employee like Alan Landing gets a base pay of $140 to $180 a week. A skilled veteran like Bob Robb makes from $220 to $250 a week plus overtime. Sullair also has a generous profit-sharing scheme. And there's that invisible income. The swimming pool, the tennis courts, the capricious generosity of Don Hoods. And Sullair does have some rather unorthodox economic advantages. Take these vending machines, for example.
The vending machines help a lot because you'd be surprised how much an employee puts into a vending machine in a day at 20 and 25 cents a drink and candy bars and so forth. And
so your vending machines?
5 cents. They used to be zero, but there was too much waste at the zero rate, and that was just too much temptation. If it was worth nothing, it's worth nothing, and they just throw it in the garbage, full cans of Coke. And so we were going to put a penny on. Then we thought, well, a nickel would, and everybody thought that was fair. It was recommended by the shop people to put the nickel on, actually, that there was too much abuse.
Another indirect way of adding to employee paychecks is a 10% discount that Sullair pays for at a couple of local supermarkets. The company also provides free prescription drugs.
Thank you, ma'am.
And there's Sullair's own subsidized gas pumps, dispensing gasoline at 35 cents a gallon. Do the extras you provide, the cheap gasoline, the supermarket discounts, the nickel vending machines, all of the other amenities around here for the employees, does that add up to a major financial consideration for the company?
It's not what you pay a man, it's what he costs you. And that's Will Rogers. But the point is that the amount of money that we spend on that creates the atmosphere for the high productivity. And we sit down cold-bloodedly. There's people in this company who disagree with some of these things, mostly in the financial and accounting area. And they evaluate it very coldly, but they never can win because the productivity is higher.
What about the list today? Anybody got any complaints?
When we were going to get a notice.
Every Tuesday, there's a meeting between 4 shop representatives, different ones each week, and plant management. Sullair is non-union, and this is the company's equivalent of the grievance procedure of a union shop.
I would join a union. I'm pro-union, but not particularly if there's good management.
You got to have a lot of dissatisfied people in order to have a union. People that need protection. We don't need any protection.
In Sullair, as in any place where work is done, there is the difference in outlook between the generation that works without question and the generation that questions everything.
The main thing about the job to me is it's not exactly what I want to do. So that keeps, no matter if they have a swimming pool standing right next to me, I can jump in it every time I get hot. When I get out, I still have to do this. I have to build this machine.
I enjoy coming to work here. I enjoy the job that I'm doing. I don't understand these other people not liking to come to work. I know it the way it used to be. I hated to go to work. But it's a different story here.
On a hot afternoon, Don Hoods might order everyone to lay down his tools, and he'll send in a truckload of beer. Like many of Sullair's policies, it just sort of happens, not the result of a master plan or any abstract social philosophy. But don't get the idea that Don Hoods is some kind of sweetheart. He's a tough, shrewd businessman doing what he feels will make him and Sullair a success. Well, how do you answer the charge if somebody, one of these fellas, said to you, listen, I don't want this beer at 4 in the afternoon. Why don't you take that money and pay it to us in cash?
Don't drink the beer.
For those who don't believe in utopias, there's an epilogue to our story. A group of Sullair workers has just asked the United Automobile Workers Union to come in and represent them. They still like Sullair as a place to work, but they want bigger paychecks, even if it means less free beer. So next month, the entire workforce will vote on whether they want a union shop. We'll let you know how it turns out.